special edition of the Donno Drop here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Why I've got Hard Rock Stadium behind me when we're going to be talking Panthers and Heat, I can't explain certain things, my friends, but I can explain that this Roundtable episode is brought to you by BetterEdge.com, BETTOR Edge.com. Use our code 5RSN, and they're going to give you a $20 sign-up bonus just for signing up. BetterEdge.com allows you to bet on sports games completely legally in the state of Florida, by the way, because it's a social platform and you're betting against other people. No sports book, no hidden fees, just awesomeness. BetterEdge.com, code 5RSN, and we are brought to you by Prize Picks. If you're looking for that individual action, your favorite Miami Heat players, your favorite Florida Panthers players, you want to parlay them together, pick over, under, more or less on various stat projections, win real money. PrizePicks.com or the Prize Picks mobile app. Use our code 5. That's FIVE, and they're going to double your first deposit up to $100. So we are one night away from the Miami Heat opening the Eastern Conference Finals on the road in Boston. Heat and Celtics, second year in a row, go figure. And the Florida Panthers are 2 nights away from opening up their Eastern Conference Finals series in the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Carolina Hurricanes. So who would have thought a couple of 8 seeds would be at this point? So let's introduce a couple of panelists on this one. You know him, you love him, hardest working man on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Brady Hawk is with us. Brady, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you for having me back on.
Of course, man. It's nice to see you again. And I know Brady keeps busy this time of year, as does this man, Alex Baumgartner, Florida Panthers expert here on this network on 5 Reasons Sports. Alex, how you doing today, sir?
Doing great, guys. Happy we can talk about both teams today.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. And Alex, I'll start with you. With these Cats, and pretty similar stories on both sides, right? Because both of these teams, Heat and Panthers, barely made the playoffs. In the case of the Heat, they had to go through the play-in. In the case of the Florida Panthers, they were basically playing playoff intensity hockey from January on because they were so far down in the standings, they had to climb all the way back up. Talk about the journey, Alex, not only getting into the Eastern Conference Finals and having to slay a couple of giants in the process, but even getting into the playoffs did not feel like a sure thing a couple of months ago.
Yeah, from basically June, July of last offseason, this Florida Panthers team has gone through a total overhaul. First of all, they make the huge blockbuster trade where Florida gets Matthew Tkachuk and they ship out Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar. They won the President's Trophy last year, first place in the NHL regular season, and then get swept in the second round by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Big trade happens. They fire Andrew Burnett. Well, they removed him. He wasn't technically hired as the head coach, but interim head coach. He gets the boot. Paul Maurice comes in. There's new systems. The team isn't playing great. Into January, they were borderline almost at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. And then right before All-Star break, which was in South Florida, they got a couple big wins, including against the Boston Bruins with about 2 seconds left. That kind of catapulted the entire second half of the season. They go on a run. They win 6 games in a row out of the last 8 to make the playoffs. They play the Boston Bruins, who are the greatest regular season team of all time, beat them in 7, which might have been the craziest Game 7 in NHL history, where they tied it with 1 minute left, beat them in overtime. Then they play the Toronto Maple Leafs in the second round. And as we saw the Toronto media, they were calling the Panthers an irrelevant organization. They were basically saying how the Leafs had a clear path to the finals now that the Bruins have been knocked out. The fans were chanting, "We want Florida." And the Panthers win all 3 of their road games, including 2 OT games. And now they're in the Eastern Conference Finals. So this Panthers team has been playing pretty much Game 7 hockey since the last 2 weeks of the season. And it seems like that from the moment the playoffs started. The team was down 3-1 against the best team in the league. No pressure. They win it. Go to Toronto, no pressure. They win it in 5. So this team's probably the scariest team to face right now in the NHL.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And Brady, when I'm listening to Alex's awesome rundown on the Panthers, obviously the situation's 8 seeds, Cinderellas. There are similarities there, but there are also differences. The Panthers did it with a new head coach. The Heat have had Eric Spoelstra, old reliable, for 15 years now. I mean, Spo has been around seemingly forever at this point. And then, unlike the Panthers, who did make a blockbuster trade, the Heat, for the most part, ran it back from last year. And that was obviously before they make the Kevin Love and Cody Zeller additions. So talk a little bit about the Heat's journey. And let's start with the offseason, Brady. Did you think the Heat even did enough? Because it was hard for me to imagine that being so quiet in the offseason, they could ever get here.
No, I remember when everybody was mad because they ran it back, and I was like, I was actually not the optimist because I kept saying, like, well, technically they ran it back worse because it was like they lost PJ Tucker. So it was like you can't even use the run it back term all the way. And then you see the way that the rocky ways throughout the season, they don't start it out well, kind of similar way. The only difference is they didn't drop as far in the Eastern Conference as the Panthers obviously did. So it's a little different in that scenario. But I think they were locked into an area where it almost felt like they were preparing for the play-in. Like just with what was happening throughout the season, they didn't even have any major regular season injuries. Like it was just like the usual Jimmy's going to play this many games. The usual, like all those type of things. I thought Tyler had the decent sized jump. Bam makes an incredible sized jump. And it was like, how are all these players playing better than they did in the past, yet they're not winning games enough to be going higher in the seeding? And their role players felt like they were a little bit inconsistent throughout the regular season. And then that's why none of this makes sense. You head into a playoff series where they're, I say all the time, there's like 3 minutes away from not making the playoffs in that Bulls game. I remember we were sitting there in that arena and we were like, okay, this seemed the last time we're here. Like they're down in that game. It was like Max Strus having a legendary performance in a play game. Jimmy ends up with 31. It was like they were still clawing their way through. It was like, yeah, I don't even think they're not going to have a chance to even get out of this game. And then they get their way out of there. All of a sudden, things look different, obviously, with injuries. Tyler gets injured. Giannis gets injured. But either way, this team is a completely different team than regular season. That's pretty much what it is. And when you talk about kind of the Panthers thing, where it was like they've been treating so many things like a Game 7, that's the way Jimmy Butler is in the playoffs. Like every game feels like a Game 7 to Jimmy Butler because he hits a different mode. Even though he says playoff Jimmy isn't a thing, it's a thing because you watch this guy on a nightly basis, and it's like he just puts it all out there. It feels like every night where it's like this guy is not the guy you just saw from a couple months ago. So it's definitely been a rocky season. Spo even said at practice yesterday, he goes, he wished it at the beginning of training camp that he could have told his guys that after all we've been through this season, and we're going to go through basketball hell, and we're going to end up right back where we were last season. And it's like, it's a wild thing because if you told anybody that this season, nobody would have believed you.
And it's crazy on that, Brady, that we're actually getting the same Final Four from the bubble year with Denver and the Lakers on one side and the Heat in Boston. So maybe the whole bubble fraud narrative that people were using mostly for the Heat, but then even a little bit for the Lakers winning that chance because they've been awful a couple of years since. Maybe the bubble fraud narrative goes out the window now.
Yeah, I mean, that was always just a dumb idea. Like if we're gonna, I know people have mentioned this, but if we're gonna talk about a season, how about the one after it, where those 4 teams basically had to walk into a jointed season, where they just had to just do a run-on season into the next one, and then all of a sudden, those teams, the 2 teams from that NBA Finals, both of their coaches just got fired, and both of them just melted down in the playoffs. So if there was a way to kind of recognize fluke, I think you could lean in that direction over the bubble. And I'm not even discounting that season. It's just the fact that when you put teams at a setting like they did in the bubble and it was just about hoops and you see those teams kind of make it out. And I know it's a little different. It's like all 4 of those teams have their 2 best players still playing. That's why that's an important statement. The bottom of the rosters look different. I think LeBron and AD are the only players on that team from the bubble year, I think, which is insane. So either way, if discounting that whole run is stupid to me in general, but if we're going to talk about a season, let's talk about 2021.
You know, both the Miami Heat and Florida Panthers have superstars, and obviously the ones who have been shining brightest are Jimmy Butler for the Heat, Matthew Tkachuk for the Florida Panthers. And Alex, I want to start with you on Tkachuk. We talk about that blockbuster trade. I know that there were some people down here, obviously Jonathan Huberdeau was quite beloved by Florida Panthers fans. So there was definitely some unrest, like, you know, I hate to see this guy go. How much better is Tkachuk really? He's answered that question throughout the season and throughout the postseason so far, right? And when the Panthers have gone against some superstar players on opposing teams in the playoffs, none of them have stepped up the way that Tkachuk has. So, you know, how pivotal has Tkachuk been to this point, and how do you see him matching up with Carolina in these Eastern Conference Finals?
There's a few reasons why the Panthers were able to make a run into the playoffs. There was a few reasons why they were able to turn it around. Matthew Tkachuk was the main reason. I think Alex Lyon is the reason why they got in with those final 6 games where they won 6 in a row and then got the OT loss to clinch it. Matthew Tkachuk had 109 points this season. He surpassed his career best, which he got last year in Calgary. No one on the Panthers is even close. Carter Verhaeghe did hit 40 goals this year, but in terms of point production, there was no one even close to Matthew Tkachuk this season. And then in the playoffs, he's top 5 in playoff points right now. I think now that McDavid and Draisaitl are gone, among active players, I think only 1 or 2 guys are ahead of him. He has 16 points in 12 playoff games, and he is just a playoff performer. It's ridiculous how good of a player he is because he plays a physical hockey game. He had 123 penalty minutes and 109 points. That doesn't happen. There's no guy in the NHL that gets 100 plus points, 100 plus penalty minutes. He is one of the leaders on that team, and he's a fan favorite. You can say what you want about the trade, and Jonathan Huberdeau is going to be loved in this city for a very long time. He'll probably have his jersey retired, but when there is an opportunity to get a player like Matthew Tkachuk's caliber, that does not happen. And, well, he came into media day saying he wanted to, I don't want to quote him on this, but he said something along the lines of, I want to build this in South Florida. And, well, they haven't made a conference final since 1996, unlike our Heat counterparts, who's there almost every single season. This is one of the best runs in franchise history, and Matthew Tkachuk is the catalyst behind it.
Yeah, unbelievable. And obviously we know, Brady, that Jimmy Butler has been the catalyst behind the Miami Heat. So, and you talked about it and you said it right, that the way Jimmy approaches every playoff game, it's like a game 7 to him. So I guess the 2 most important questions I have about Jimmy heading into the next round is, number 1, how confident are you that he's going to be close to fully healthy? Because I don't know, he's been dealing with that ankle for quite some time now. And then number 2, is he going to get enough support from everybody else? Because like the Heat shooting was blissful during the Milwaukee season, a little bit rocky at times during that Knicks series. I feel like all of Jimmy's counterparts from Bam on down are going to have to be on point next round.
For sure. And to start with the ankle thing, like that is the number 1 question for me about the series, not just about Miami, like the series in general, because if Jimmy is even injured a little bit, it makes it weird because you mentioned in the Knicks series, not only was the shooting down, but Jimmy, like his absolute insane performances that he had in the Milwaukee series weren't happening in the Knicks series, for 1, because of the ankle, 2, because of the way the Knicks played him, where they were just sending doubles and triples to him every time he got the ball. But I don't think they can survive off their role players like they did in the Knicks series against the Celtics team. So they need Jimmy to play at that level. And the question is that ankle, that you're never going to get a true answer, because if you ask Spo, he's going to say he's fine. If you ask Jimmy, he's definitely going to say he's fine. I think even today he was like, when they asked him about it, he just pushed the question. He's like, I'm good enough. Like, he's good enough to play, which that statement I think scares people when he says I'm good enough, because they want him to be great. Yeah. But that's the question. We'll see how he looks. I think the fact that he gets this many days off is just crucial. The fact that there's not a quick little turnaround, I think that now I'd be worried. The fact that he gets this many days off, the only thing I'd be worried about is if he tweaks it again. If he tweaks it again, then you're having some problems. But in terms of everything in general for the role players, they're definitely going to need him. Like, there's certain guys I think that favor in this series that they need to get to. I thought they stepped up really well in the Knicks series, even though they shot poorly. Like, they're going to need to shoot better probably than that 30% that they shot in the Knicks series. But they stepped up, like even in that game 6 where they needed Jimmy was getting literally, as I asked him after the game about the doubles, he's like quadruples. And it's like he was seeing 4 Knicks defenders every time he touched the ball. And in that 4th quarter, guys like Max, guys like Duncan, guys like Caleb, all these guys were hitting necessary shots to kind of put them over the hump. They need that production from their role players. And then he's also going to need a sidekick, and it's going to be Bam Adebayo. Like, they're going to need him to step up in this series. He's averaged 25 points a game in the regular season against Boston. I don't expect that, but they need him to just take advantage of the spots on the floor that he did in the regular season. So that'll be crucial. And like you said, this series does come down to shooting in a lot of ways. You look at the way Boston shot, not even all season, but in this playoff run, like they're shooting 40% from 3, and they run 5 out, and they have all these guys, role players that can just shoot all over the place. And you have to obviously try to double down on these guys like Tatum and Brown. Like, you could do it in the Knicks series because they can't shoot as well. But in the Boston series, things look different. So if they can somehow match them with shooting, then I like Miami's chances even more. But everything does come back to that Jimmy ankle, because he's the one that ultimately forces their best looks.
We are joined here by Miami Heat expert on the network, Brady Hawk, Florida Panthers on the network, Alex Baumgartner. And when we come back, we're going to get keys to the series. What's it going to take for the Miami Heat to get it done against the Boston Celtics? It's feeling like an every year thing between these two teams. And what's it going to take for the Florida Panthers to get it done against Carolina in the Eastern Conference Finals? That right after we remind you, friends, that prizepicks.com, they're always open for your action. And if you've been watching and listening to the 5 Reasons Sports Network for more than like a day, I don't know why you haven't signed up to Prize Picks yet. I mean, it's so easy to have fun, enhance your in-game experience, and win some money. Prize Picks mobile app, free, easy to use mobile app. Download it right to your smartphone. PrizePicks.com also works. I know my guy Troy Stradford, who hasn't figured out the whole app thing yet. He primarily uses the PrizePicks.com. I primarily use the mobile app. And what I love about this, first of all, completely legal in Florida. Very easy to deposit, very easy to withdraw. You can get paid just about instantly. And if you use our code 5, F-I-V-E, when you sign up, they're going to double your first deposit up to $100. You deposit $100, they give you $100 extra for free. Prize Picks combines my love for daily fantasy and for parlays. You simply select 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players. Predict if they're going to go more or less over or under their stat projections. And if you get all your predictions correct, you're winning real money, like times 5, times 10, times 20 your money. It's unbelievable at Prize Picks. It's so easy. PrizePicks.com, Prize Picks mobile app, our code FIVE5. And if you want a little bit more of a traditional experience on these games, sports betting wise, but with a twist, check out betteredge.com. I'm on both of these guys, believe me. BETTOR edge.com. Use our code 5RSN, and they're going to give you a $20 bonus just for signing up with our code 5RSN. And you're betting on these games completely legally in Florida. It's pretty genius because betteredge.com figured out if we're not a sports book, and if we're letting human beings bet against one another, it's a social platform, and boom, it's legal in most states, including this great state of Florida that I'm sitting in. I think all of us are sitting in right now. So betteredge.com with our code 5RSN, you can get action on all the Heat games, all the Panthers games, and you're going to have a lot of fun doing that. So welcome back into our roundtable here, special edition of the Donno Drop. So guys, before we get your keys and predictions, I think something that's really cool, just being down here, okay? Because I remember certain years, like Alex Baumgartner brought up 1996, the last time, I don't even know if you were born yet at that time, but the last time the Panthers, he was shaking his head. No, I don't think Brady was either. the last time the Florida Panthers made a run through the Eastern Conference Finals into the Stanley Cup Finals, and then like the next year, you know, the Heat had a run to the Eastern Conference Finals, which is the farthest they'd ever gotten at that point. But then imagine if both of those things had happened the same season at the same time. That's basically what we're experiencing right now, right? And I love how, you know, the Heat open up with the Celtics on Wednesday. Panthers open up with the Hurricanes on Thursday, and they play alternating nights. So we're never going to have to be like divided on our attention, and we're never have any nights off from these games. And I think it's cool. And Alex, I'll start with you on this one. Players and coaches from both teams seem to be into the runs that the other teams are having. I know that they get asked about it a lot in the press conferences. So what's it been like, Alex, covering the Panthers and, you know, hearing Paul Maurice and a lot of the Panthers players talking about what the Heat are doing right now?
Well, our captain, Sasha Barkov, is a huge Heat fan. When he has time to get out to games, he gets out to games. I think Dwayne Wade trucked him once a couple years ago on the behind the basket. There's a video of that on YouTube. But Tim Reynolds asked him in the press conference 2 days ago, he said, you know, you're Bam's favorite player. And Sasha goes, I'm Bam's favorite player. Wow. And, you know, he's like, what's Bam going to be like on skates? Like Zdeno Chara, who was the 6'9" hockey player.
Yeah, that's right.
But, you know, it's big for the whole community because, you know, these guys, a lot of them are from Canada, Finland, Europe. So they kind of come here, they become Heat fans, and it's cool to see how there's parallels in their season. That's why we're here to talk about it. Both were 8 seeds. The Panthers made it by 1 point, which is almost like going into a play-in and then getting to the playoffs with the play-in. They made it by 1 point. It's cool to see because the city hasn't had this much success in the same year from both teams. Now the Heat are a different story because they're always contending, even if they don't have the greatest of rosters. They're still putting on teams that can make runs in the playoffs. The Panthers, on the other hand, they might have the teams that look on paper like they can make these runs, but they haven't figured it out since 1996, just 5 years before I was born. So I've never seen anything like that. I do have to say one thing that's interesting. Matthew Tkachuk, his one of his best friends from middle school is Jason Tatum.
I saw that. So
for 3 years.
He's rooting for them, isn't he? That bastard.
He hasn't. No one's asked him that yet. So we'll see if we can get something out of Matthew and who he's going for. But at the end of the day, there's Heat guys that love the Panthers. There's Panther guys that love the Heat. There's Dolphins players that love both. So I think it's just a great thing for the entire city. I drive around down here in Broward. One car here has a Panthers license plate, and then one car here has a Vice Heat plate. The fans are just really excited, and the alternating days is huge. ESPN takes the Western Conference series, so they're not losing revenue by double stacking the Heat and the Panthers, which is pretty smart on them. It's fun, and Paul Maurice said today, the only thing better than coaching those two teams is owning a sports bar because you're rolling in it.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, this is one of those things where, like, because my wife doesn't really follow sports. So there's like some nights where she's like, oh, why don't we go to like Sports Grill or Duffy's or something? Then I'm like, wait, no, you probably don't want to go one of these nights when, the Heat or we're going to have to wait like 30 minutes to get a table. So she's in for a rude awakening for the next couple of weeks. Now, Brady, as far as the Heat go, now, I'm sure Spo is supportive of the Panthers. Knowing just how much film he watches, I can't imagine he's watched too much of the Stanley Cup playoffs with how dug in he is right now in the trenches preparing for the Celtics. But does what the Panthers are doing, has that come up a lot in Heat media?
It's funny, by the way, when you mentioned Spo not being locked into that. He's been so locked in that he's mentioned like when the all NBA teams were going to come out, and they're like, oh, they tell him, they're like, oh, they already came out. And he's like, I didn't see those. Like, he was talking today about something else, about another topic of like something that's going on around the league, or the lottery tonight, that the lottery is going on tonight in the NBA. He had no idea. So he is fully just trenched in what's going on in this playoff run, that he's not probably thinking about anything. But the players are, and Spo's been asked about the Panthers, and he went on about like everybody down here in South Florida. You got like all these college teams that went on the runs with FAU and Miami.
That's right.
You have Nova that goes and wins the D2 national championship. Like, it's like all the way down the line. You just got people that these teams down here that just keep going crazy. But it's pretty cool to see all these players. I don't even remember what game it was, or it had to be the Bucs series when they had a Heat game, and then they were in the locker room talking about going to the Panther game the next day, where they were getting a box and and everybody's like, oh, I'm jump in. I'm going to go. Even Jimmy said he was going to go. I don't think he ended up going, but Jimmy was even in on it, going to check this team out as well. So like, there's definitely been an interest. I know Max Strus he's been not only talking about them all the time, but I've seen him every time they win, he's posting on his social medias and everything. So there's been a lot of connections there. It's cool. And then even you mentioned the Dolphins before. You have Mike McDaniel sitting courtside basically at every game, which is just a funny thing to see. And Chris Greer was there the other day. Like, it's just everybody just seems to be just kind of crossing ways in a lot of ways. It's harder for Miami and the Panthers, it feels like right now, because they have these runs going on at the same time. And then when football starts up, Spo can't really repay the favor, because then his season starts back up really. So it's just a funny dynamic down here. But it's been a cool thing. And I know somebody mentioned in the comment before about just combining parades. The only issue is you got one in Miami and one by Sawgrass Mills Mall. So I don't know how
just start the parade at Sawgrass, and we'll walk all the way down to Biscayne Boulevard.
Man, that's like marathon. You gotta lose some weight on the way.
It's like a 25-mile. I don't know what it is. It's probably something like, yeah, you're right. It is about a marathon distance, I think, between those two. That was a great comment. Indade says, both teams win. Combined Panthers Heat parade. Shut down Miami like the pandemic. Miami reopens at the beginning of Dolphins training camp. I think I'd still rather have two parades, because that's then two parties, and then we can shut it down after that.
Let's just get out of the conference finals first, and then we can get to the next step.
Yeah, I'm getting way ahead of myself. All right, so let's get Alex. I'll start with you, and then I'll get to Brady. So let's start with Florida Panthers, and of course, let me set the table on this. No surprise, both of these teams, as they've been all playoff long, are underdogs heading into their respective series. Neither of these teams were supposed to win a single round to this point, yet here we are, underdogs again. So, Alex, let's start with the Florida Panthers against the Carolina Hurricanes, because something from where I sit, you're a lot closer to it than I am. These two teams seem very similar. So it's like playing against a mirror image of yourself is always a complicated thing, I think, in any sport. Obviously, Carolina had the better regular season. So what are the keys to you for the Panthers, and how could you see this series playing out?
These, like you said, these two teams are so intertwined. I'm not even looking at the game because they play very, very similar games. Hard forecheck. The Panthers wouldn't have won the series against Boston, and maybe not the series against Toronto, if they didn't have hard forechecks. Multiple times, a hard forecheck led to a game-winning goal or a game-tying goal. But when I say intertwined, there's players on the Panthers that used to play for the Canes, including Eric Stahl, who was the captain there for years. His brother Jordan is the captain of the Canes now, and Mark Stahl is obviously on the Panthers as well. So a lot of Stahls there. Etu Luostarinen and Gustav Forsling were both let go by the Hurricanes, and now they're both having, career seasons or career couple years in Florida. Paul Maurice coached. He said, I think I coached all three of Carolina's coaches, because Paul Maurice was one of the youngest NHL coaches of all time. He took over the bench in Hartford when he was 28, I think. Hartford became the Hurricanes. Rod Brind'Amour was the captain of that team. Rod Brind'Amour is the head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes, and I think his two assistants were also under Paul Maurice. They're such similar teams in terms of scoring from the back end. They were both top of the league in defensive points. The one thing is Carolina doesn't have a standout superstar, except a lot of their players are way above good. I would say elite. Sebastian Aho. They have Jordan Martinhook, who is kind of like a depth player who's leading the team in points. They're getting points from everywhere on the board. Brett Burns is having another great playoff on the back end from points. They're a hard-hitting, fast, aggressive team that doesn't necessarily have that standout superstar. Now, Florida might have the best player in the series in Matthew Tkachuk. They might have the second best player in the series in Sasha Barkov. But by no means does that make them the favorite, because both of these squads, hard-hitting, play more complete team games. Florida just knocked off Toronto, who probably had the most top-end skill in the NHL besides the Edmonton Oilers. And now both of those teams are out. The NHL playoffs, hardworking teams that play their team system and get contributions from all across the board usually have more success than teams that are built from the top. Because if your top-end players don't show up, you're out. So it's hard to say who has the higher edge in this series. Carolina, just because they have the better regular season, is the betting favorite. But these two teams are so close. I think this might be the toughest series the Panthers have had to face, even saying that with the Boston series.
Okay, that's good info. So, like, for anybody who thought, hey, we've already done the hardest job, and that was eliminating Boston, not necessarily the case. So that is some good info. And Brady, when we talk about being underdogs, I don't even know if the line has moved since yesterday, but when I looked at it yesterday, the Celtics are minus 600 for the series, which is a really big number, even for anybody favoring Boston. That's hard to justify. The Heat were plus 450 dogs. And then I was looking by those ESPN analytics. They give the Celtics a 97% chance of winning the series, which seems crazy. So the Heat
actually went to 96 today, so it's looking better. They're looking like they have a shot.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Now, I'm assuming you probably give the Heat better than a 4% chance, but what are the keys going to be to actually take the Celtics out, unlike last year where the Heat were, about a shot away from taking the Celtics out?
So, yeah, it's a lot. Repeating the fact that Jimmy's ankle's going to have a lot to do with this, but barring a healthy Jimmy, I think there's a lot of advantages that they can find. The one thing that's going to be interesting in this series is you have the advantage, I believe, in the best player in the series. I think we can all agree on that. And they also have the best coach in the series. So those are two big advantages right off if we're just talking about on the surface before talking about anything schematically. And it's like when you have that advantage, it's a pretty decent sized advantage, many would say, coaching-wise, that you feel good about it from that perspective, that you have to make adjustments on the fly and that type of stuff. And the reason I mention that is because that's going to be the keys, at least at the beginning of the series, because there's so many different lineups that both teams can go to. There's the aspect of today, for some reason, I don't really understand it. Joe Mazzulla kind of said that they're going to start with the two bigs lineup, which favors Miami in a way. But why would he say that 2 days in advance or a day in advance? I don't know. Is that a smoke screen because he's actually going to go to another lineup? We don't know. But if they do go to that lineup, then you're able to kind of play your game. You're able to still start Kevin Love. You're able to still have Bam anchor the defense. The main difference is you don't have PJ anymore, who was the primary defender on Jason Tatum. That means there's going to be a lot more on Jimmy. There's going to be a lot more doubles being sent to him. So there's going to be different ways that they have to go about this than last year. And that's why I think Spo absolutely hates being asked about like a series from last year, because it's just, he always says it's different season. It doesn't matter. And in a way it's true, because it's like, even if there's like the similar personnel, there's still minor changes that could shift an entire game plan. So offensively, I think it's going to be a lot of Jimmy just fighting for switches, because it's a team that could just switch everything. Like, you even look at the fact that people will say, well, Boston has a lot of really good defenders, obviously. You go down the line, you have Marcus Smart, you have Derek White, you have a lot of really good guard defenders. Well, those are Jimmy's favorite matchups. Just because they're a good defender doesn't mean they're a good Jimmy defender. Like, he's going to want that smaller defender to back down. There's ways he could work out of it. I think Jimmy could really have an advantage of that series in the series off of that. And then all of a sudden adjustments are made. Then they start sending extra help at him. And then all of a sudden now he's making these kickouts and it comes down to 3-point shooting. So it's just going to be a balance. It feels like it's just going to be an adjustment series. And that's why I just like Miami's chances personally, because I like Erik Spoelstra's chances in this series. I feel like he's probably will be the reason they end up winning. If they were to win, it would probably be a lot on Spo. And then in terms of all the way down the roster, like, if you even, it's funny because when we compare it to last season, you'd go down the roster, you'd say, well, this guy didn't perform as well. You have Tyler that was kind of up and down. You have Kyle that didn't really give you much. You look down the roster this year in the playoffs, and every single one of those players have given you something at a much more than you would have expected. So it'll be interesting to see who that guy is that pops off. My personal X factor, I think, is Kyle Lowry, just because I think they need a pull-up guy that's without Tyler. But I also think he can calm them into good offense, because this is a Boston team, like I said, they could flatten you out. Like, they could switch all over the place. There's certain things. You need your point guard to settle you. And as much as that's Gabe Vincent to start games, the true offensive PG that's going to get you into early offense is Kyle Lowry. So if he could play, even think back to that Game 6 last year in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, it was the big Jimmy game in TD Garden, but they don't win that game without Kyle. Kyle played an extremely, really good Game 6. I thought he played really well down the stretch of that Game 7. He was almost the reason they came back and got to that point to hit that shot. So I think he could be really big in this series. So if he could play at that level, I think they have a shot. So it'll be interesting. It's a lot on Jimmy. It's a lot on the role players, as we know, but ultimately I think it's a lot on Spo.
Well, really good stuff from both of you gentlemen. Before I give you each an opportunity to plug your stuff and everything you're doing for the network this week, Alex, I wanted to throw this at you because I don't know crap about ticket selling. Well, what's this about? Anthony says the Carolina Hurricanes are saying they're going to refuse to sell tickets to Panthers fans for road games. Do you think the NHL is going to get involved? First of all, I'm not sure if they're actually doing that. And second of all, is there any rule against that? Like, what's going on with that?
There was a big story when the Panthers played the Leafs, because
I remember that.
The Panthers win Game 7 at about 11 p.m. in overtime. They cancel their flight to South Florida, and they immediately fly to Toronto. News comes out the next day that they're playing Toronto the day after. So they had about a day to travel and play Toronto. So the Panthers go ahead and do what looks like it was a pre-sale on their tickets, where they only let South Florida residents, or I think it was U.S. residents, purchase. Canadian media saw that, kind of ran with the story for about a week, saying they were barring Canadians from entering the stadium. George Richard from Florida Hockey Now talked to the Panthers president and CEO, Matthew Caudill, that same day and said that everyone can purchase tickets the following day, which would have been Game 1 in Toronto. I did see on Ticketmaster that the tickets, at least the tickets sold by the team, were only for residents in that area. But I've seen on Twitter that multiple fans from South Florida have already purchased their tickets and flew up or flying up to Raleigh. You legally cannot ban people from an arena. You might be able to say, hey, if you're not from here, you can't buy tickets from the team on this day because we want our fans to have a pre-sale, because you can't really have a pre-sale in the playoffs. The NHL is not going to get involved because they legally cannot say, hey, you're not from Raleigh, North Carolina, you need to get out of this stadium. That just can't happen. So Panthers fans, if you want tickets, you'll be able to get into the arena just fine.
Fair enough. Good to know it. Before we let you both run, Alex, I'll stay with you on this one. Let people know where they can find you on social media. I know they can see your Twitter handle there, and what you have planned the rest of the week on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Yeah, so A Baumgartner 91 on Twitter. I've been covering this team the whole season and the playoffs. Games 1 and 2 will be remote coverage, but I will be in the arena for 3 and 4. And then if there's a clinching scenario, I might be in Raleigh, North Carolina. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. 5 Region Sports Network, where all the articles are, and we'll be doing a couple more shows here for the Panthers. We're doing a preview show in 2 days on Thursday with Colby Guy from Florida Hockey Now. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. What about you, Brady? What are you going to be up to on the network the rest of the week and for as long as this playoff run goes?
Yeah, at BradyHawk305 on Twitter. 5 on the Floor podcast is pretty much what we get into every day. Games 1 and 2 will be on playback, which is where we watch the game live with you guys. So tune into that. But playback /5 on the Floor. And I'll be in the arena for games 3 and 4 for the home games for Miami. So that's pretty much it.
I love it. Great stuff. And yeah, guys, make sure you support the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Hit the thumbs up button on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Alex Donno. Of course, Brady Hawk 305, Baumgartner 91 is how you find the guys. Well done by both of you gentlemen. And, hopefully this is not the last time we can do this, because if there is another round to be had, if you know what I'm saying, maybe we can do this again. So we will talk to everybody again next time on another episode of the Donno Drop here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. See ya.